Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us in this live session. I'm Alejandro Kikuchi from Workana. I'm in our office in Kuala Lumpur right now, but I'm the only one here. So, as you know, right, the COVID-19 pandemic is bringing about unprecedented changes worldwide. And now more than ever, it's crucial for businesses to recalibrate and aim for maximum efficiency. And how work is changing affects not only engineering or design or marketing jobs, but also professions that traditionally were based on physical interaction. We'll get into this today. A digital strategy is no longer nice to have, but rather a matter of survival. In that regard, Workana is working closely with many companies, helping them reliably hire and work with on demand talent. It's a great way to keep moving forward efficiently. As part of our endeavors to support companies in this journey, we are hosting these sessions in which industry leaders share their insights and plans on the best ways to tackle this new normal we are experiencing. So far, we've had great conversations with a rich variety of businesses, fast-moving consumer goods, companies like Reckitt Benckiser and Sunquick, tech startups like Fave and Curlec. We also spoke with Lalamove, operating in the logistics and gig economy, a huge oil and gas corporation like Petronas. And now we have the opportunity to talk to Naluri, a company tackling health from a digital perspective. So today our guest is Asran, CEO for Naluri. Let me add him to our broadcast. Hello, Asran. Hi, good morning.
Oh, good morning to you.
How
Good
are
morning.
you?
Very well. I'm doing very great today.
All right, great. So, hey, thank you so much for joining me in this
Yeah.
session.
Yeah.
Um, I know it's going to be interesting. Of course, we have been catching up backstage.
Yep.
So, to start off, can you please share a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Okay. Well, if I look back at the last 25 years of my career, the first half was a more traditional professional career with a management consulting firm and other larger corporates. But the second half has been about building new businesses across a wide range of industries, from highly regulated, capital intensive businesses like a new airline to a fast moving internet technology, media entertainment space, and now digital healthcare. So the common theme, though, has been about how do you look at an existing industry and find ways to make things much, much more affordable, much more accessible, and much more convenient, especially now that we've got great technology that allows us to do so.
All right, all right. That's I'm sure discussing these past experiences, like getting started a whole airline, could we could do a whole series of sessions just about that.
Yeah,
But let's focus a little bit more today on your current adventure
sure.
with Naluri.
Right.
Can you please share what is it that your company does?
Okay. Well, the gap of the problem in the way healthcare is delivered today, we think there's an opportunity to reimagine and redeliver healthcare. Number one, 70% of healthcare today are chronic conditions, whether that's physical conditions like diabetes, heart diseases, and cancer, or mental health, depression and anxiety and stress. And these are conditions that you can't solve with just a single consultation, a single visit, a single prescription. It requires structured ongoing help over multiple months and sometimes even longer. But doing that where you have to go and see a professional, make an appointment, or even if it's like a telemedicine platform, that starts to become very inconvenient and it can become very costly. So how do we reimagine doing that, right? And of course, the other part to that is how do you look at mental health and physical health together? Because healthcare today has been quite siloed. Everybody looks at their own specialty areas, But the reality is these conditions are deeply interlinked, especially between mental health and chronic conditions. So again, can we bring technology so that you put the patient or the person in the middle and all specialists serving them as a team that's coordinated rather than one person having to chase after different specialists and try to make sense of all these different advice that they may be getting. So that's what we try to do, to use technology to change healthcare.
That's amazing, and you're right on spot. Traditionally speaking, dealing with these kinds of ailments or diseases was tackled, still is.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, the patient needs to visit each healthcare professional separately, then try and make sense out of all of that. And
Right,
each healthcare professional would speak from their unique,
right.
biased point of view, right? There's no holistic approach. And nowadays, with how collaboration is being facilitated by technology, it only makes sense to properly leverage on the power of technology.
Yep.
All right.
And, and if you think about it, what COVID-19 has done is it really showcases the importance of using digital so that we avoid face-to-face interactions that could increase our exposure to these pathogens. But that requires, professionals and consumers to learn to be more comfortable to use tech as a means of communicating.
Of course, and that's as I mentioned in the opening statements. Work is changing, and that not only affects software engineers or the digital marketers, but
Mhm.
everybody, and that includes, of course, healthcare professionals.
Right. And in our case specifically, right, because when we look at the glue, besides just medical doctors, other very important professionals are psychologists, especially health psychologists and dietitians, right, or even physiotherapists and pharmacists. The challenge in a market like Malaysia is that their supply is very, very limited, right? So, for example, in Malaysia, there are only about 220 practicing clinical psychologists and about 600, 700 practicing clinical dietitians. And so the way that we work is still the traditional one-on-one model, like the conversation we're having right now, right? Which means when I'm talking to you, I can't talk to anyone else, right? That means as one psychologist, if I had 50 clients 1 month, I am full out max capacity, which means as a whole country, we have capacity for only about 700,000 Malaysians who need help, and we're ignoring 7 million Malaysians who need help but can't get access to help. And that is why today, if you go to the government hospital, your wait list is 9 to 12 months. How are you going to get better if every therapy session is 9 to 12 months apart? But if you go to a private center, right, it may be $100 an hour, right? And so how many sessions do you need? That starts to become too costly beyond the means of most Malaysians. And so that is why we want to reimagine the way this profession is done so that when you can use tech, instead of going on this one-on-one model, we're now taking one psychologist and instead of serving 50 clients, we're already pushing 500, right? So we're 10xing the number of people that they can help. And therefore, you can also significantly reduce the cost so that you can now serve a wider number of people.
That's amazing. So, in a sense, providing access to that kind of support to a far wider audience, basically.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And just a couple of weeks ago, I had this session with Zach from Curlec,
Mhm.
and he mentioned a kind of a similar thing, but from a sales perspective. He would say, my sales team in a day, if they had 4 meetings or 5, their day was full, because you have to travel back and forth between each meeting.
Mhm.
Now everything is remote, so they can pack maybe 8 or 9 meetings in a single day. So it's a similar concept, but as we just mentioned, sales or marketing or engineering, that's like the obvious, in a sense, the obvious benefit, or where we can see at first glance how
Right.
this changing work is positively affecting that. But
Mhm.
this, what you're mentioning about psychologists and 10xing their capacity, and or 10xing the capacity in general for treating patients, I think that's amazing, and it's a similar concept applied to a practice that has been largely ignored when talking about digital transformation.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Now, that requires them to reimagine how they work, because it's not just a matter of going from physical sessions to an online virtual session that we have now, right? Because that's not a lot of savings, right? It's like from 4 to 8 in a day. But we've got to think now, imagine, how do I have 10 to 20 simultaneous conversations, which means I move away from a live video conversation to a text-based conversation. So, you can jump from one conversation thread to the other like you have with your friends on WhatsApp. But if it was only that, that also may only take you from 1 to 2. But now, how do you apply natural language processing and a lot of algorithms to detect emotions and sentiments based on the words that people type, to be able to create other digital features that you can then move the conversation to a self-help model, right? So, for example, hey, let's talk about the stress triggers you're facing right now, Alejandro. But when you got time, 10 minutes later during the day, why don't you complete this module on stress triggers? So now you're doing that on your own time, frees up my time, right? And
Right.
you're answering a set of standard questions, which makes it more efficient for me to review your answers when you're done, and then become even more efficient because the computer now is analyzing your responses to thousands and thousands of other people, and basically already tell me, hey, look, this Alejandro guy, he's kind of like this weird bottom 1%, and he's got these peculiarities, right? And so I can then jump in and be much more targeted and precise in a much more efficient manner, right? And
Right.
so
Right. Right. Right.
that means psychologists now have to become data analysts. They have to understand data visualization, right? Rather than just kind of look you in the eye and kind of, that more traditional way of doing it.
Right. 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 And that makes sense. I mean, there's the cues and hints you get from patients change drastically. You get
Mhm.
a far richer data set to work with. Now, well, of course, it's crucial to know how to deal with that larger set of data. All right,
Mhm.
all right, quite interesting. I think I'm very eager to learn from you how all of these approaches are working out throughout our conversation. So, going back to your current company and in the context of the pandemic. So back in March, when this Malaysia and many other countries went into lockdown, what was your reaction back then? And what did you find yourself needing to do within the company?
Sure. I think, well, first of all, what I've learned is we have to over communicate even when we don't have certainty and clarity, right?
Hmm.
On one hand, you want certainty and clarity, but the reality is you don't have any, right? And sometimes as a leader, you might feel like I must just take action for the sake of taking action and being decisive. But that can actually very quickly limit you, because oftentimes we decide based on our past experiences, right? But number one, we've got to be sort of a lot more open, a lot more connected with different data points and different people, and keep communicating with our teams, which are now completely remote, right? So, for example, we moved our daily stand up to twice daily, 9 to 9:50, and then 5:45 to 6, so that we're very clear how do we close the day, and we're very clear what things are so critical that they need to continue at night versus, guys, let's just kind of call it a day and move on to the second day or the next day. Because if you're not careful, people feel a lot of pressure and they start to work late every single night. After 2 weeks, a lot of them are going to get burnt out. And you got to have this mindset that, yes, we're in a crisis, but this is a long haul crisis. So you need stamina, you need resilience. You can't just sprint and sprint and sprint and then be completely collapsed and burnt out after 2 to 3 weeks.
That's a great way to frame it. It is a crisis, and what's even crazy is that it's not even done yet. It is luckily getting better in some countries, not that much in others, but we never know, right? How second waves, third waves, and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely a long one. And as you're saying, just echoing what you just said, resilience in this case beats short-term speed or effort. You need to, I think, and over communicating is in that sense, it seems like a sensitive choice, because then you have the ability to, at the end of the day, say, all right, we've reviewed whatever issues we're dealing with. Everything seems to be under control. So 6 p.m., everybody go rest or play with your
Well,
family.
yeah, the reality is they're not under control at 6, but you just got to tell guys, okay, look, let's pick up this battle tomorrow,
All
right?
right, all right,
It's
right,
not
right.
under control, but you got to tell people, we're in for long haul, so let's not go crazy.
It wouldn't be a startup dealing, trying to find a way on a crisis if things were under control, right? That would be out of place.
That's right. Yes.
So you're right. Instead of saying it's under control, saying, all right, this we'll tackle this tomorrow, or as you said, some other things. All right, this specific item we need to sort out. So
That's right.
then working late, working long hours becomes not the default, nor something that organically happened because everybody's at home, but rather a tool.
Yeah.
If this needs immediate attention, we'll use this tool of working late to sort it out. If not, let's take it a bit easier. So
That's
then
right.
we build this resilience and we make sure that for months on end, I mean, we've already been through this, 6 months?
Hmm.
And for all we know, it could be another 6 months in which we have to still uh, live with all these measures. So definitely. All right, excellent. How about your clients?
Hmm.
Because so far we discussed internally, you went from one stand-up meeting to two a day, for example. How about how you approach and provide service for your clients? How did that change?
Well, first, the first couple of months, March, April, even May, were very challenging because even a lot of our current clients where we had contractual commitments, a lot of the work had to be stopped because a lot of our programs were chronic disease programs where we normally have to kick off and meet someone in person to take their blood so that we can measure a baseline of their blood sugar and their cholesterol, etc. Plus, a lot of clients were like, look, if it's not directly about COVID, we're putting everything on hold, right? Because they were trying to make sense of what was going on. And so it
Of
was
course.
unnerving that, a lot of our work had stopped and we weren't sure what was going on. But by late May, early June, suddenly a lot of pure mental health work came about. People started reaching out to us to say, hey, look, we're really seeing our employees burning out, deep depression, unable to function at work. And the traditional way of just kind of having face-to-face counseling sessions no longer work because it has digital and we need to scale it much faster. So suddenly things picked up, right? June was a 50% growth on May, and now
Wow.
September was 3x of March.
Wow. That's okay. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
That's amazing. And it shows that what you're doing, it proves that what you do has an impact, and it's proving to be truly useful for the companies, their employees.
indeed,
All right.
yeah.
Okay, great. um did you did you need, so out of, maybe not as soon as it started, did you have to hire someone in the past months, for
Oh,
example?
of course, yeah, yeah. And we've hired people that we've not had even had a chance to meet them in person.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm sure having to hire in this context posed a few challenges. What was different in that process compared to the way you used to hire before the pandemic?
Well, I guess the slight difference is I've always been very cautious about the interview process generally, because from my experience, I've interviewed thousands of people over the last 25 years. I know I'm terrible at an interview. I'm not a good,
Okay.
because the reason for that is as humans, we actually make very intuitive decisions, right? Like even before met, or even I might have met you, and before you've spoken a single word, my mind's already made a decision whether I like you or not, just from looking at your face. I may
Right.
not be consciously aware of it, but the subconscious and the brain makes a very snap decision. And the rest of that 59 minutes, the brain is filtering out everything that you say that doesn't confirm that gut instinct, and only retaining information that confirms your gut belief. So we end up making these very biased decisions based on that first gut instinct, right? But what's more important for me is to say, okay, well, look, I know I can't trust my gut instinct. So how do I apply a more structured approach to this? So when I interview, I know kind of like, okay, these are the few things I want to assess. But what matters is, let's say if I've made a decision and that person joins me in 3 months, at the point of interview, I'm not really sure whether that's a fit. But in 3 months, all of us are like 95, 97% sure, right? Because you've seen that person work with your teams. But most of us, what we don't do is then at that point say, how accurate was my assessment, right? If I
Mm,
assess that from this and this and this criteria, did that actually pan out? Right? And what you find is that there are things that you thought were important at the interview process wasn't a good statistical predictor whether that person became a good hire or not, right? I'll give you one example. A lot of us tend to be interested in people who exhibited a lot of energy and enthusiasm during an interview, right?
mm,
When you've got that passionate candidate, you're like, wow, I want this person on my team. But actually,
right,
what we found out over the last several hundred hires is that 3 months later, that was no longer statistically significant. That means there were just as many people who were enthusiastic and energetic at the interview who did not turn out to be enthusiastic and energetic 3 months in, and those who were kind of lukewarm energy turned out to be amazing performers 3 months on. So then you
wow,
realize that criteria actually wasn't a good criteria. We were too intuitive, right?
right.
So that is why we've got to be very careful with just making decisions based on this intuitive face-to-face judgment.
All right. So you're adding a data approach to the process. I think
Yeah.
that's great because then data is objective, so it maybe not removes altogether, but helps you bypass a bit the biases, that intuitive part of the process.
Yep.
Um, and I think that's great. The way you're telling it sounds like that approach had started even before the pandemic. I mean, independently, right?
Yes.
Was it? And I'm sure one of the advantages of that is that then you are not as reliant on a in-person interview as if you are relying a lot on your intuition and all of that.
Well, because before Naluri, right, my previous startup, we went from zero to 700 employees in 30 locations around the world in less than 3 years. So two things.
Wow.
One, you're gonna have to hire people in other markets, so you have to hire remotely. And
Right.
and two, you can't be the only one hiring everyone, so you've got to now train your managers and your leaders to hire people. And here's the
Right.
thing, if you don't create structure and you don't specify this is how we're going to hire, everybody starts to make hiring decisions based on their past experiences, right? And suddenly culture is going to be a lot harder to meld. So it was very important for us to define the values and characteristics that we wanted people on our team, to define the criteria, how we were going to evaluate those things during in the interview process, and then to test that with that 3-month test, and then keep changing the criteria or the assessment so that we got better at predicting whether this person is going to be a great fit into the company or not. Because
All
otherwise, you
right.
fail, right? Like 700 people in 3 years. How do you do that?
Yeah, 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 definitely. That's crazy. And that's the kind of approach, right? Let's create this framework, and then will regularly review the results of the framework and iterate it and make adjustments. That's
Mhm.
an approach that, for example, a software developer is very much used to implementing, right? But people working on recruiting, or people working in healthcare, because this is all related, of course,
Yes.
are not used to that approach. It's just
Yep.
as the psychologist is not used to dealing with data and then adjusting his or her approaches. Uh, I'm generalizing, but for the most part, recruiters are not used, or people doing recruiting are not used to having that similar approach.
Mhm.
So I think that's a very interesting um, concept or mindset you are implementing, like agile, keep iterating, have an actual objective framework.
That's exactly it. It's taking that agile philosophy from software development and applying it to other areas of our business. And the main thing is not so much the data part, but it's closing the loop, the learning part, right?
Hmm.
Where every week you have these retrospectives and figure out, what's working, what's not working, how do we adjust? How do we adjust? Constantly adjusting, as opposed to getting comfortable doing the same thing week in, week out, month in, month out.
That's and because that's one of the killer of innovation is I'm doing this way because it's the way I've always done it, right? That's the worst, and that's not how disruption happens. That's not how a startup grows.
Okay.
Right. Okay, great, very interesting, very interesting. um so about this and about this agile approach, and so you are already mentioning recruiting. Is there any and how that also applies to the healthcare professionals through your technology? Is
Mhm.
there any other area in which you have this mindset of approaching something that traditionally is not approached with an agile mindset?
Well, I guess if we go first along the lines of people development, it's performance management, right? And so
Okay.
traditionally, performance management is two parts. One, it tends to be you do that once a year, or maybe you do it like, twice a year or even four times a year, but it's kind of very based on these calendar sequences, right? And the other thing is people tend to get into assessment mode, meaning I need to put you into one of five buckets, right? Number one, two, three, four, five. Significantly exceeds expectations. Meets
Yeah,
expectations,
yeah, yeah.
right? So the problem with that is once you get into assessment mode, there goes all the opportunity but having a development conversation, because both parties are never in full agreement, right? Like your employee will say, oh, you remember I did all these bad things, but you didn't remember I did all these good things, right? And so what we said is two things. One, you know what? When you do all of that at the end, performance doesn't really improve, but tensions and conflict increases. What if we just nuclear bomb that whole thing where we do not assess people, right? Like we're not trying to get you into this relative thing where I've got to create this what do you call it, a bell curve distribution of performance. We don't believe in the bell curve distribution of performance. We believe in basically 90% of people are in the same boat, right? That you want to keep them because they're in, and there's 2 to 3% that are deliberately underperforming, and that's not a appraisal situation. That is, let me tap you on the shoulder and ask you to look for another job, right? There's also another 2 to 3 to 5% who are truly outstanding, and it's about, look, how do I create new growth opportunities for you, promote you faster, but I don't need to get into this 5 4 3 2 1 assessment for you, right? And so what we do is we say, look, everyone's on the same boat. These are the 4 to 5 business priorities for the company, and if we succeed as a company, everybody succeeds, right? But we're not going to try to relatively rank you against your peers, number one.
Oh, okay.
So once you remove that, right, then the other part is we need to have much more frequent development conversations, right? At
Mhm.
the very least once a month, ideally at least 15 minutes once a week. But once a month, at least we sit down and say, hey, you know what? How are your personal growth objectives align with the company's immediate priorities? How do we create more opportunities at work so that it fulfills what you need to grow in order to succeed in your career as well as to meet your personal aspirations? How can I, as your leader, help you create these opportunities and give you feedback because I want you to grow? Because I'm no longer assessing you, right? So suddenly that conversation, that dynamic is much more open, because people are not worried that you're going to give them a number or rating.
Right. That's, I think, and it's crucial in that regard, sharing a common goal, both for the business. That goal needs to be clear. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? I'm interpreting, for the business, that goals needs to be, of course, clear, so everybody's aligned and we know where to go. But also sharing the goal, manager and employee, that hey, I want the best for you, right? If the employee succeeds in the company, that's great for business. Otherwise, and if it's not, there's a problem with alignment with the bigger goal.
Indeed.
um, and I agree, because then having those kinds of conversations in which, even if you have to deal with negative stuff, like, hey, this, you didn't deal with this properly, those kinds of things, if you still have that safety net or framework of, hey, we are all trying to get to the same destination, or
Yep.
it makes sense.
Yep. We also have to go a step further and almost teach people how do you have those conversations,
Hmm.
right? as you say, because sometimes they have to be difficult and blunt, right? Like, someone says, look, this is not working out, you need to change.
Right.
And sometimes people have two impulsive reactions. One reaction is, no, I disagree with you, and, like, you're wrong because of this, this, this. Or two, oh my God, I'm the worst person. What is wrong with me? I'm terrible. This is the end of, like, it's two extremes, right?
Right.
And so what we need to teach people is say, look, when let's say your boss or your colleague in a way criticizes you, the first thing you got to do is be aware of these two biases, and the other part is find out more information, right? Just if you're completely shocked, just say, tell me more, right? Invite more data points, ask them to elaborate, ask them for examples before you make that reaction, right?
Right.
And sometimes when you hear more, then you're like, oh, I got it, and it wasn't what I initially thought you meant. That can solve like at least 50% of the potential conflicts that arise in performance conversations.
Right. Because that helps further illustrating the issue at hand, right? In most of these cases, it's not as simple as, hey, I expected A and you delivered B.
Yep.
It's always far more nuanced and complex than that. So I agree. I think the simple question of tell me more can help iron those things out. Okay, that's interesting. And now during the pandemic and having to work from home and whatnot, have you find um, have you started relying on certain tools, for example, that you weren't using before?
Well, I wouldn't say you not using before, because I guess as a tech startup, we probably embrace a lot of the collaboration tools much easier than traditional companies, right?
Right.
Because once people are in different locations, and people are operating at different times of day, right? Some people are much more night persons, and some people are early morning persons, right? And so when you use a lot more of the collaboration and project management tools that move to an asynchronous form of communication, avoiding or minimizing that one-on-ones to only the morning and the evening, means you disrupt people less, and you force people to document their work, right? Like status updates should always be captured on the tool, not during a Zoom call or a team meeting, because that's not the best use of one-on-one time or synchronous time, right? I think the other part that we're always challenged on now is to look at automation tools, right? Like what are all the work that requires us humans to do? And today it's amazing how much new stuff is coming out in the world of automation, right? How clicking from kind of one application to the other, a lot of these things that we used to kind of cut and paste can be done completely automated, right? And that helps, because sometimes even this mindset that even if you save 3 to 5 seconds per transactions, but you're going to be doing 100 transactions a day, it counts for a lot, right?
Right.
But you always have to be looking out for these opportunities. How do you change your work and look for technology enablers for that?
That's I think that makes sense. And going back to the documenting processes and sharing information asynchronously, it's over the past few months we started seeing this concept of Zoom fatigue, like too many meetings. So over communicating does not necessarily mean let's jump on a video call meeting for everything,
That
right?
is, yes.
Is over communicating, is but doing it in a smart way, taking advantage of asynchronous communications, being better at sending a simple email, something as commoditized and we take for granted as email. All of a
Yep.
sudden, how you compose an email and you send it matters far more than what it did before this. Because before this, if the email was kind of clunky, you could always just talk to your colleague 5 meters away from you and say, hey, I can't make anything out of this, come and we'll sort it out. And now you
Yep.
have to try to avoid those things.
So take that example alone, right? Something as simple as, well, if you just use pure email, right? Like, how do you report a bug, right? Because as a new software company, you always have countless bugs, right?
Of
But
course.
an email, it actually is quite inefficient. It takes several more seconds for the recipient of your email to then decipher the key information from your email. But if we start using forms, right, which means, okay, if you're going to report a bug, what priority level, right? Priority low, medium, high, and Azran. Give it Azran level. That means if it's Azran, get it done now, right? Which area, which device, etc., so that when someone gets it, they can immediately file it. They can it falls into their project management schedule because it goes straight in, right? So something as simple as how you report bugs can be automated to make it much more efficient than just text.
Right, definitely. Otherwise, you get, hey, this isn't working. All right, what device are you in? I'm in mine. Let me see. Chrome. All right. Have you tried it? Right, and there's back and forth that consumes everybody's time. Yeah,
Indeed.
if you typify or normalize some of those, and it makes a lot of sense. So definitely, a conclusion is not it's not only over communicating, but also leveraging on the proper technologies to do it, technologies and methodologies to do it,
Yep.
to be able to pull it off. All right, great, interesting. um so now we've been talking about what you've been doing and how you've been tackling all of this. So
Right.
now I'm nearing the end of our session, looking into the future.
Yes.
um So, what do you think has changed for good in how, for example, how you engage clients? That even hopefully we get a vaccine and all of that, and life goes back to normal-ish. It's never going to be the way it was maybe last year, but considering the new normal, what do you think has changed for good in how you deal with clients?
Well, I think generally the adoption of technology is much faster because as much as we as a tech company, it's more natural for us. It is not natural for a lot of our corporate clients, right? And so the willingness to sort of again, right, just getting on a Zoom call and getting them on Slack or other collaboration tools across organizations, that is something that has been very positive, right? It didn't used to exist before, right? Like Slack was an internal tool, but now when you have to work with their client and they're on certain channels, it's a lot more efficient.
Okay, that's great, and that I'm sure it can take a bit more time or less depending on the client, but the onboarding of some of these tools can only mean good stuff for the future. I mean, if bigger corporations start getting used to dealing with Slack, for example, which is such a great communication tool, then all of these things we've been discussing about properly communicating, conveying an idea using the right form or email or text message on Slack, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So lastly, and as a closing thought, for other business leaders out there, what do you think it's a big, and you've already mentioned a bunch, so maybe kind of to wrap up some of the ideas. What do you think is a huge opportunity for other business leaders that has come out because of this whole pandemic?
Well, there's a lot of stuff. So I'm going to pick something that is near and dear to what we do and what we're most excited about in the future of work, right? And that is how technology can actually make us more human. And by that, actually, I mean help us understand subtle emotions. So, for example, right now we're having a Zoom conversation, and I'm kind of just guessing whether you're happy or you're curious or you're not happy. But it won't be too long in the future, and we're already working on things where I can automatically detect micro facial expressions on your face. I can analyze your voice, your temper, your valence. And so you might be verbally telling me, for example, hey, I'm happy, but your face may not be, right? And so if I get tools that says, hang on a second, that may not be what Alejandro means because I'm detecting, the computer's detecting a difference between what you say, the emotions you convey from your words, i.e. voice to text, and what your face says or your voice says, right? So I can be more clued in, right? And I think we're going to be able to take our level of communications and our relations between humans to a whole new level. And this is crucial, as you can imagine, when we're completely distributed around the world, right? So the challenge today, even with Zoom, I mean, forget about people misinterpreting each other on emails. Even on Zoom, we can misunderstand each other. So, but
Definitely.
the next generation of tech is going to take us to a whole new level where we can now quantify human emotions to help us better assess how do I read the situation.
That's a great example. I think I stumbled upon a video in which some of this technology was being tested not long ago.
Okay.
So you had someone talking on such like this, and they were reading the micro expressions and
Yeah,
trying to understand what that person was really feeling. Really interesting stuff, and that's, as you are saying, maybe that's simply just one example, but the concept of technology can help us be more human. I love it. I think it's quite interesting, and it makes us see technology in a way that it's not always seen, right? And that's definitely interesting and food for thought.
indeed, indeed.
Yes, yeah, all right. Okay, so Asran, thank you so much for sharing and for joining me in this conversation. It's been really interesting. I'll be looking forward to keeping in touch with you, making sure I'll be up to date with what you guys are up to. We are
Right.
definitely on to something interesting and exciting. So yeah, I'll definitely keep track of you guys.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. Thank you for having me.
And everybody here watching, thank you very much and stay safe. Bye bye.
Bye.